Welcome back. In this episode, we'll be covering chapters 16 through 18 of Karl Marx's Capital, Volume 1. These chapters take what we've already learned about surplus value and push the analysis further, showing how capital expands and transforms over time. Chapter 16 briefly reviews key ideas from earlier sections, reinforcing the difference between absolute and relative surplus value. But the real focus of this video is on chapters 17 and 18, where Marx examines how capitalists manipulate wages, working hours, and productivity to maximize profit, and how they disguise the true extent of labor exploitation. These ideas remain relevant today. We still see businesses pushing workers to be more efficient while keeping wages low. We also see how corporations reinvest their profits not just to grow, but to gain more control over labor itself. Chapter 16 of Capital serves as a transition. Here, Marx recaps the two main ways that capitalists extract surplus value from workers, methods we've explored in previous videos. First, there's absolute surplus value, which comes from extending the workday, making people work longer hours without increasing wages. Then there's relative surplus value, which increases productivity through better technology or work processes. This allows capitalists to produce more goods in the same time, lowering costs and boosting profits. In this chapter, Marx reminds us that both of these strategies have shaped capitalism from the beginning. Capitalists either demand longer hours or find ways to make workers more productive, often both at the same time. It sets the stage for what comes next, how surplus value fuels the expansion of capital itself. Marx now shifts focus from how profits are made to how they are used to reshape the economy over time. With that foundation in place, let's move on to chapter 17, where we take a closer look at how the growth of capital impacts wages, production, and the labor market as a whole. In chapter 17 of Capital, Marx builds on his earlier analysis of surplus value, but this time he shifts focus to how changes in capital itself impact wages, labor, and the economy as a whole. The key question he explores is this: what happens to workers when capital grows or shrinks? As businesses grow and reinvest their profits, they often spend more on machinery and raw materials, increasing constant capital. But at the same time, they try to keep labor costs down. This means hiring fewer workers while increasing output, keeping wages low even when profits rise, pushing workers to be more productive through new technology or stricter management. In an expanding economy, capitalists may need to hire more workers, but the rate of exploitation also tends to increase. More production doesn't necessarily mean better wages or working conditions. It often just means workers are producing more wealth for their employers without seeing much benefit themselves. Now, let's look at the opposite situation, when capital shrinks. During economic downturns or crises, businesses often cut costs to survive. Since wages are one of the biggest expenses, capitalists respond by reducing work hours or laying off workers, cutting wages or benefits, speeding up work while keeping pay the same. This shows the fundamental instability of capitalism. Workers are necessary for production, but they are also a cost that capitalists try to minimize. When profits fall, workers suffer first. Another important concept Marx explains in this chapter is how the ratio between constant and variable capital changes over time. As industries develop, businesses rely more on machinery and technology, reducing the relative amount of money spent on wages. This means more automation and mechanization, a shrinking role for human labor in the production process, fewer opportunities for workers, even when businesses are growing. For example, think about the auto industry. Decades ago, cars were assembled by hand, requiring thousands of workers. Today, robots do most of the work, and human labor plays a smaller role. This shift increases profits for businesses, but it also means fewer stable jobs for workers. This chapter highlights a core contradiction in capitalism. Businesses want to expand and produce more, but in doing so, they reduce their dependence on labor. At the same time, workers are needed to buy products, but when wages stay low or jobs disappear, fewer people can afford to buy what is being produced. This contradiction fuels economic crises. When workers don't earn enough, demand for goods drops, and eventually, businesses struggle to make profits. This cycle of expansion and crisis is a constant feature of capitalism. So, what do we learn from Chapter 17? The expansion of capital doesn't always mean more jobs. Often, it leads to more technology and fewer workers. When capital shrinks, businesses respond by cutting wages or laying off employees, making life harder for workers. Over time, capitalists invest more in machines and less in wages, leading to a system where workers create wealth but benefit less and less from it. These contradictions make capitalism unstable, constantly moving between growth and crisis. In Chapter 18, Marx explains how surplus value, the extra wealth created by workers, is measured, and how capitalists use misleading calculations to make profits seem smaller than they really are. Let's break it down. Imagine a worker spends a day making products worth $300, but at the end of the day, they only get paid $100 in wages. The extra $200 doesn't go to them, it goes to the business owner as profit. This is surplus value, the wealth created by workers but taken by capitalists. But business owners don't want workers thinking about how much of their labor is going unpaid. So instead of comparing profits directly to wages, they compare profits to all business expenses. Machines, rent, materials, making their profits seem smaller. This makes it sound like labor is just one small part of the equation, when in reality, only labor creates new value. Machines and materials don't add anything on their own, they just transfer their cost into the final product. A machine can't operate itself, and raw materials can't turn into finished goods without human work. These calculations affect real-world policies. When companies claim their profits are low, they use that excuse to keep wages from rising, justify layoffs even when business is booming, argue against raising the minimum wage. The truth is, no matter how much capitalists invest in machines, they always need labor to create value. That's why they keep pushing workers to be more efficient, not to make life easier, but to increase surplus value. So what's the key takeaway? Capitalists manipulate profit calculations to hide how much of their wealth comes from labor. Machines and raw materials don't create value, workers do. The fight over wages is really a fight over how much of the value workers create they actually get to keep. Once we see past these tricks, it's clear why workers push for fair pay and better conditions. In chapters 16 through 18 of Kapital, Marx gives us a deeper look at how capitalism operates, not just in how surplus value is extracted, but in how capital grows, reinvests, and distorts the reality of worker exploitation. We saw how businesses expand by squeezing more out of workers while investing in machines to reduce labor costs. We also saw how capitalists present profits in ways that hide just how much of their wealth comes directly from unpaid labor. These ideas aren't just abstract theory, they explain the realities we see today. From corporations cutting jobs despite record profits, to workers being told to do more with less, the logic of surplus value still drives the system. In the next chapters, Marx builds on this foundation, exploring how capital accumulates and how its relentless drive for growth leads to deeper inequalities. Understanding these patterns is key to understanding why capitalism produces crises and why it remains unstable. If you found this breakdown useful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you see these patterns in today's economy? And don't forget to check out our previous videos to catch up on earlier chapters of Kapital.